Welcome to the Built Different Show, the podcast for tradies who are built different. I'm joined here with my very good friend Simon Me.
Hello.
And I'm also joined by Katie from Profit First Tradies. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you for having me.
So today's topic is all about setting yourself up before going into business financially. And, you know, we know tradies, a lot of them don't realise what they're getting themselves into until they're right in the thick of it. So
we're good at building stuff, maybe not as good at managing our finances.
Yeah, 100%. So today we're going to have a chat about the top tips and advice for tradies wanting to get into building their own business.
So this is a topic that's really interesting for me and something I'm excited about because as a third-year apprentice, I'm starting to think about what's next for me down the track. Where do I want to be taking my career? What do I want to be doing? And once I'm qualified, what do I need to do then to step out? And actually, once a qualified carpenter, how do I go about starting my own business from there? And what should I be thinking about now? And because I don't want to get down the track and be like, it's too late. So this is going to be extremely beneficial for me to find out and do a bit of an uncovery on what I need to be thinking about. So we're really excited to have you here.
Glad to be here.
All right, so let's get into it then. So you've grown up around tradies. What's the biggest financial mistake you've seen them make?
Leaving it, thinking it's all going to fix itself.
Okay.
That when they win the next big job, when they get the next client, when they get more staff, that's going to solve all their financial problems. And it never, ever does. And in fact, it usually makes everything worse.
Yeah. So it's just chasing that, the next job, right? It's chasing and you get stuck in a bit of a, all right, just need to get over this hurdle, just need to get over this hurdle, but it doesn't make the problem go away.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So is it kind of like too late that people, the tradies, start to think about the financial side of things? It sounds like it's probably something that needs to happen up front.
It should. In a perfect world, it would happen up front. But for those who may have already just started their business, it's never too late. But thinking ahead where you want to go, particularly if you're third or fourth year, like yourself, you want to go out on your own potentially, thinking about what that looks like and then putting the plans in place now. So it's a bit like building a house. You have to have the piers right. You have to have the slab right before you put up the frame and so on and so forth. Same concept applies, but people tend to rush into like throwing the frame up on a slab that has no piers, and we know how that'll turn out.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that one. Before we get into it, do you want to tell us maybe a horror story about someone that you've worked with and you've engaged with, and tell us how it shouldn't be? And then we can kind of work back from there and what we should be thinking about when we go start setting up our own business and taking it from there.
Yeah. So the horror stories are all very similar. It's just the zeros on the end that change. What most people do is they get into business, they get some jobs on the side, they build it up, they go out on their own, and then a couple of years down the track, they realise they've put no money aside for GST, no money aside for tax, and they get their first tax bill and they usually have no money or very little money to cover that. And then they're already partway through the next financial year, so then they're just on this roller coaster that never...
chasing your tail from there.
Chasing their tail. And it just makes it really difficult for them to ever catch up. What most people do is put their head in the sand and think that it will just fix itself.
Not
and
a viable
it doesn't.
strategy.
It doesn't. The other thing I see is so many people think it's just them, that they're the only ones who have gotten themselves into this situation, that nobody else is in such a terrible financial situation as they are. And that's not the case. I mean, I've worked with tradies almost 11 years in my bookkeeping business now and over 5 in my coaching business. And I would say 98% of people that I talk to say something along the lines of, I can't believe I did this. Like, I'm the idiot. I must be the only one. No, you're not.
So just coming back a second, you touched on there, you've been in helping tradies for 5-10 years. How did you get into it? Let's take a few steps back.
Yeah, sure. So if you look at my family tree, I always joke every male in my family has a trade, has had a business. My dad was a mechanic, my in-laws were builders, my husband's a carpenter, my brother's a landscaper. The list goes on. Yeah. I myself wanted to be a motor mechanic. I am a massive rev head. If there is a boat, a bike, a car, something that's getting pulled apart and made go faster, I want to be there. So I wanted to be a motor mechanic, and that's what I was going to do. And when I finished high school, I ended up going to America as an exchange student for a year, which was amazing. But when I come home, it would have meant that I would have started my apprenticeship a year after everyone who had kind of left school.
And bit of competition.
I didn't want to be the year behind. Yeah. I didn't want to be the first year when they were second year or the third year when they were fourth year. So I decided not to do that, and instead I've always loved numbers. I've always been a numbers nerd. So I went into financial planning and worked with small business owners that way.
Okay.
Instead.
So then, and how did you find your way into helping tradies specifically?
So when I was a financial planner, I worked with a lot of clients who were 5-10 years out from retirement, who had self-employed, worked their butts off, and had nothing really to show for it.
That's terrifying.
They'd worked really hard. At best, they'd paid their home off. Some of them may have had an investment property, but they had a business that wasn't worth anything if they didn't run it.
Yep. Because cash flow is just so important, especially when if you're out on your own running a small team. That can be a really stressful thing for anyone.
Yeah, and they would come to me to plan for their retirement and have no cash or no assets to plan, and that frustrated me because I couldn't do anything about it at that stage. It was too late. And then financial planners, we didn't really talk about cash flow and cash management and that type of thing. It wasn't something, and even now it's not something that's really done a lot of. I had my children, didn't want to go back to work in the financial planning industry. My brother had his own landscaping business at the time. The bookkeeping system Xero had just come out. I was using that for him and had this light bulb moment that if I could get my small business owners onto Xero, they'd have up-to-date information on their businesses, and all those problems that my clients had as retirees would be solved because we would have data for them to make decisions earlier and all of that type of stuff.
All the numbers.
And it would be amazing. And then I realised I never wanted to work for myself. My parents were self-employed. It was a no-go, never going to happen until I come across Xero. And I know that sounds slightly bizarre that a bookkeeping program changed my mind. And so I was doing the books for my brother's landscaping business. I've always been around tradies, and it was a natural progression. Yeah. Plus, more chance of talking about boats and bikes and cars and motors.
Which we love. It's not... For tradies who are you're good with our hands, on the tools all day, it's not something that comes naturally to us to be, excited about doing the books and kind of keeping everything up to date. But that's a reality of running a small business. And you spoke about with some of your clients that you get quite far down the path where you're starting to look to retire, and then they start thinking about it. If that's not the right time to start having that conversation, when is?
Now is the right time. Doesn't matter where you are in business, if you've already been in business a few years or if you're about to start out and it's still a few years down the track, now's the time to start planning and thinking about what your goals are. Do you want to buy a house down the track? Well, then cashies on the side are not going to work for that because the banks don't take that as income.
But why not?
So that's, great in theory, but if you're a few years down the track and you've got a deposit and you want to buy a property but have no income to back it up, that is clearly going to be a massive issue. And what I find with tradies is we tend to be very reactive. I want to do this today. So what do I need to do? Oh, I found this property, this boat, this bike, this whatever. I need to borrow. What can you do? And it's like, well, your financials don't support that.
Yeah. The paper doesn't back it up.
No, so we have to think ahead.
Things that we do as we're going through our work, it's more in the short term thinking, like the day-to-day, like what do I need to do this week? What do I need to get done for next week? As opposed to thinking, what happens comes tax time? What happens down the road? And it's almost a bit of a luxury to take a step back and to think 3-5 years ahead. But it is important to start planning about it, thinking about where you want to go and then how you're going to get there and what steps you need to take to go. And
I'm a perfect example. When I started my first business 11 years ago, I hated goals and thinking that far ahead. Like, things can change. So many things can change. Why would I bother thinking about and putting plans in place for 2, 3, 5 years down the track? That just seemed stupid to me. And so I didn't do it. And then I hated my business. And then I realised I'd been self-employed for too long to work for anyone else. And I had to figure out how I liked my business again. I loved my clients, but I hated what I was doing at that stage. It was just the bookkeeping. So whilst I will always say that bookkeeping is the most important thing you do in your business, I hated it. And I'm still not a super fan of it. And I have a bookkeeping business, but I have a team who love doing the day-to-day. For me, it's about how, and like you said, it's not something that you're excited about doing. So for me, it's about how do I make it easy and simple for my tradies so they can do those things.
Yeah. So I understand the importance of bookkeeping and how fundamental it is to running a small business. But when I go through and finally get qualified and look to actually go out on my own, whether it be subcontracting or actually running a small team in a small business, what is my first step? Like, where do I start? How do I even get started? And is that the time when I am qualified or am going out to being a subby? Is that when I actually start, or is there anything that I can be doing now to prepare myself for that?
The easiest thing that everybody can start doing now is to keep your receipts. I know that
I've got a
sounds
lot of receipts.
really super boring, but keep your receipts. So then when you do go to
Every
your tax
Bunnings
accountant,
trip, they're like, just piled up in my car. I probably should be doing something with them, but they're at least there, which is good.
and it's just getting in that habit, because when you go into business yourself, you need to have your proof of purchase for the ATO.
Yep.
So just doing that one step now, again, sounds really boring, but that's going to set you up for making that change so much easier. Just keep in mind that the dash of your car is not the spot for Bunnings receipts, because they will fade.
Yeah, those Bunnings ones in particular are really bad for fading.
Yeah.
You're just got to take a quick photo of it, send it off, and save it to your phone somewhere.
So I actually use an app called HubDoc, where you just take a photo, it uploads it, takes all the data off it, inputs it all into Xero for you, and does all the data entry for your bookkeeping.
Making the tech work for you.
Tech. That's that's why I have a bookkeeping business, because I love the tech and I love making it simple and easy.
You obviously specialise in systems and processes that flow really smoothly to ensure that you've got the tools available so you're not spending as much time doing the bookkeeping.
Absolutely. For me, it's all about finding the tech that's going to do as much of that process for us as possible. My team on my bookkeeping business, we don't do data entry. Data entry is evil. It's unnecessary. So using
even as a tradie,
absolutely,
great,
absolutely. There's apps and programs and tech that can pretty much save any data entry that we need to do. That's the boring part. But
That's the terrifying part.
But we need to capture that information so that we can do something with it. So it's just about how do we make sure that they're not faded receipts on your dash and getting the information to where it needs to be. Yep. So simple and efficient is my 2 words that I use all the time.
Simple and efficient. I like that.
I like it too. So, you spoke about the ATO, and the reason that we're keeping the receipts is come tax time, you know what you've spent your money on, you know what you can claim. So do you have any tax tips for apprentices or young tradies in particular about what they should be really remembering come tax time?
And so going back to the keeping your receipts, if you're not sure, keep them. And then when you go to your tax accountant at the end of the financial year, they will be able to go through them with you and ask the question, can I claim this? Can I claim that? And a good tax accountant will go through that with you and set you up. If they brush you to the side or don't really give you the information about it, it might be time to find a better tax accountant. Yeah. Because something I talk about all the time is your financial team. Yep. You really have to have an amazing financial team. So your tax accountant, your bookkeeper, your Profit First coach, all need to work together to help you achieve your goals.
Katie, I was actually listening to one of your podcasts and you actually said that a good bookkeeper, you actually won't talk to them. Like your best clients, you won't talk to much at all, because once the systems, the processes are all in place, it's all set up for you, and then it should just flow seamlessly. And at the end of each week or at any point in time, you should be able to have a look at it and it's all set up and ready to go for you, right?
Exactly. So at any point in time, you should be able to look at, so I use Xero as a bookkeeping system. You should be able to look at that and all the numbers make sense.
I'm sure there's a bunch of our audience out there who have that anxiety in their stomach and it comes June 30 and be like, oh, what am I actually in for here? Like, what surprise is going to hit me when I go to actually, reconcile my books?
And it happens all the time. So then they ignore it and they leave it until they get the reminder that it has to be done by this particular date. And then what happens then? They've left it all this time and the result is still the same. We've just ignored it for 6-9 months.
You hear about it like all the time on site, like blokes out there who just ignore it, put it to the side, not worry about it, and then all of a sudden they've got that pile of receipts, but then when it comes down to it, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And you hear about people getting screwed for it, and then over the next couple of years, their business is in a worse shape as they try to recover from that.
Yeah.
And so planning for it first is obviously going to make such a big difference.
Asking questions. That's if I could just say one thing that you do is just ask questions. And if it doesn't feel like the right answer, ask somebody else. So for example, don't ask your mates on site what I can claim and what I can't claim. They're not good to get advice
Everyone's got
off.
an opinion on that.
Yeah, everyone has an opinion.
And they're not all by the book either.
No. Find a good tax accountant. And if you ask the questions and you don't feel like that they're really helping you, find another one.
That's good. Write that one down.
So what I'm hearing is I need an accountant. If I'm going into business for myself and I don't want to have to worry about the tax time, the financial side of the business, I need someone to help me with it.
You need an amazing tax accountant. Yep. Not just any tax accountant, an amazing tax accountant.
Yep.
Great.
They're few and far between.
They are few and far between. I refer to mine as a unicorn.
Okay.
That's how amazing him and his team are, which is why I say ask the questions. If you don't feel like your financial team, your bookkeeper, your accountant should be helping educate you.
Yeah.
If you're just in your 3rd or 4th year and you haven't been in business before and you don't have those around you who are in business, their job is to educate you on what you need to know.
Yeah, that's
but you've got to ask the questions.
Well, I mean, there's horror stories out there, right? 3-4 years in, I haven't been putting tax aside, and I get hit with a $100,000 tax bill. That's the last thing that you want to happen, right? So
it would scare the crap out of anyone in that situation. So that's that anxiety I speak about come tax time.
Yeah, it's enough to turn you away from wanting to be a business owner, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's so much exciting things that you go out, you become a great builder. You understand your craft, and then to actually run a small business, it's a very different kettle of fish that you're working with.
Yep.
And then you've got to make that happen. There's so much more responsibility that comes with it. And I guess you kind of got to bite the bullet and not just push it aside.
Yeah.
It has to be your priority.
Right.
It has to be the number one priority. Again, going back to building a house, you're not going to skip the piers.
Yeah.
That's what the financial part of it is. It has to be the priority.
It's going to be done in the right process.
Right way.
In the right way.
Getting the foundations down to build up on from there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if when Simon eventually goes into business for himself, which we know he will,
won't be far off, hopefully.
Does he need savings beforehand? Or do you think that he can just, jump straight in?
You could jump straight in.
Could
be a little bit stressful.
Nothing like jumping in straight into the deep end.
And many people do that and they figure it out on the way. But
That's right, I'm a good swimmer, so
that is stressful. I always suggest that they do have savings aside.
For that safety net.
For that safety net, because the industry is up and down at times, and it depends on what type of work you're doing and for who as to how quickly you're going to get paid. So potentially you could do a bunch of work but still not be paid 60 days later, but your bills still have to be paid. So for me, I always say about 3 months worth of expenses plus some income. It's a bit of a guesstimate figure.
Right. That will help.
But it will absolutely help.
I've got a question around cash jobs. Cash is such a big part of our industry, and whether people like to talk about it or not, but it's kind of the way that it kind of operates, especially as you're young and starting out and trying to get that underneath your feet as you learn how much jobs cost to quote up and then to go out and do it. How should I be tackling those kind of things and then preparing for getting myself set up to run a small business when I've can make a bit of extra cash on the side? But is there a way that I can manage that to prepare myself for what's ahead?
Yeah, so my answer is always it needs to go through the books. End of story.
Yep.
But
Great.
for those who may not, and the result is still the same, if you are doing Saturday work because you're still, third or fourth year, run it like you would your business. So when you're quoting, for example, it's not good enough to just think, oh, it's going to take me 5 hours at this rate. That's enough. You've got to take into consideration your expenses, your profit, your tax,
which is
your
so
GST, all of those things. So it doesn't matter whether it's a cash job or not.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about going into business for yourself, start thinking like a business owner now.
So I think that's a really great way to start learning about what you're actually doing as an apprentice, because that's what you'll be doing down the track. Yep. As you spend less time on the tools, or then you have to go through and make good on the quote that you put out there. You have to follow through on that, and you will either reap the benefits or live with the repercussions of what you've actually quoted. So, and then financially, the impacts that can have is significant, good or bad.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I love Profit First so much, is because it gives you a framework to make sure you're putting away your GST, make sure you're putting away profit, make sure you're putting your tax, make sure you're paying yourself, making sure you've got money to pay your bills. Yeah. And it just gives you a really clear guideline to put those things away, because otherwise, if you don't and you're going to catch it up down the track, all of a sudden we end up with surprise tax bills.
Yeah, that's right. And when you're in business for yourself, talking about further down the line, as your business grows, you've got to realize that it's not just you that it impacts, right? It's bigger than you. So you need to have these sorts of things sorted so that you can stay afloat.
And it's easy to do it at the start and learn and grow with it and make those mistakes when the jobs are smaller. Yeah. Rather than making the mistakes when the jobs are smaller and continuing that on to making mistakes when the jobs are bigger, because it's much harder to recover from.
Yep. So Katie, your business is called Profit First for Tradies. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that method is?
Yeah, sure. So Profit First is a cash management method that was created by Mike Michalowicz, who is an American amazing business entrepreneur. So he wrote the book Profit First after he had built and sold a number of multi-million-dollar businesses in the tech space. And then still didn't have, so on paper it looked amazing, but he still had no cash in the bank. Yeah. And he still had to sell his home and all of this type of thing.
I think that's a story that a lot of tradies can relate to.
Yeah, exactly. So when he went into business again, he created this method that just builds on the old envelope system that our grandparents would have used. When you run out of money in your envelope, you just have to get resourceful. You can't just go find money from elsewhere, which is what we tend to do in business. I've got money aside in my tax, but I've got no money over here. I'll just take that and worry about that later.
Yeah, rob Peter to pay Paul.
And that, again, doesn't work long term. So how my book, Profit First for Tradies, come about was because obviously here in Australia, we have GST, which they don't have in America, and there's a few other differences for our tradies. I was at lunch with Mike a few years ago and we were just chatting, and at the end he just turned to me and said, "Oh, I think you should write the Profit First for Tradies version." I, of course, thought he had lost his mind and then realised he was deadly serious. So then I went, oh, okay, I need to figure out that. And that's how my book come about, because it was just putting into writing what I was doing with my trades clients, how I had adjusted his method. And it just makes things simple.
Yep. So it would have come quite naturally for you to write that book then?
It was a very easy process. Yeah. And as I said, I'm a numbers person through and through. I'm sure we've all got primary school reports that tell us we weren't very good in things. Writing was always on mine, yet it was so easy to write because it was what I was doing all day, every day with my clients anyway. Yeah.
It's so interesting because it is just a completely different skill set from someone who has come from a background on the tools, but then just how important it is to running, owning, managing a small business, and even being a subcontractor. It's a huge part of any tradies go-to. And it's not something that is really talked about too much when you are, an apprentice or, still doing your time, that it can come as such a shock to the system. So, it's really good to start thinking about those things now.
Yeah. And one thing I do find is, I would say 98% of the clients I work with tell me that they're no good at numbers or business or any of those things. Every time I work with them, we get results. We get amazing results. You're actually really good at it. You just have never been taught about this stuff.
Yeah, that's it.
So for me, their mindset around the numbers and the financials is, oh, we're no good at this. We're great at building or we're great at our trade, but we're no good at that. It's like, you're no good yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just haven't had the education. Like if you think back to day one of your apprenticeship,
So it's a lot about mindset then too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You got to invest in it early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the number one tip that you would have for someone who's just starting out? The number one tip.
Learn to ask really good questions.
Okay.
Who am I asking?
Anyone at the start. And so
I'm going to ask Simon.
Don't ask me. That's why we got the expert in.
So, for example, if you don't know where to start, ask somebody who you know is already running the business.
Yeah.
But don't take their word as be all and end all.
Yeah.
Again, coming back to the accountant, don't just take what the first one says as that is great.
That's really
Be
great
willing
advice.
to ask questions of multiple people and then think about those answers yourself and start to take from it what works for you, but always be asking questions.
Yeah.
I think the analogy in the building industry would be like a lot of apprentices come through and probably spend their time doing the same, or working with the same crew or working for the same employer throughout their apprenticeship, and they might only end up doing one type of job, whether it be just house framing or something like that. And it's like you learn that process really well, but you get a lot of experience from working in different teams, seeing how other people operate and how other teams go about building a house or whatever, and whatever kind of processes they do differently. And you can take the best parts from those different ways of managing a team or different ways of building the house. So that obviously can be applied to managing your finances as well.
And what I see is so many people will learn from their boss when they're an apprentice.
Yeah.
But the problem is
So you can say they're so old school?
They're so old school. Like when I've got a client who's youngish and they're doing things so paper-based, I know straight away where they've got their, training from.
Yeah.
Ask the questions. Like you say, if you've only ever done your apprenticeship and you've just been a framer, you're going to have to go and get experience elsewhere.
Yep. That's great. Yeah, talk to as many people as you can, and in the subbies that come on site, pick their brains where you can. I think that's a great kind of tip for any apprentices out there.
And I suppose it's a really good, thinking about if you're just starting out, you do have the luxury of picking out the best bits from the people that you know, or that have given you the advice. You can pick out the best bits and create the dream business rather than trying to claw it back 3-5 years down the track.
Exactly. And listening to podcasts like this. Listening to podcasts where experts are coming on and giving their view on things is one of the quickest and easiest ways to, if you don't know where to start, listen to the podcast.
Yeah, 100%.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Our audience, keep listening.
Yes.
So we have a few questions from our community on our socials that have been submitted. If there was one thing I should implement next financial year to better my finances, what would it be?
Think about your goals.
Okay.
Because otherwise it's like building a house without a plan.
Yep.
How far ahead should I be thinking?
As far as it's comfortable for you to start with. It's something, again, that you'll build on. So for me, when I started my first business, thinking 5 years down the track was crazy.
It's almost impossible.
So it might be a month, it might be 3 months, it might be a year, it might be 5 years, it might be a week.
Yep.
But just start getting into the habit. Again, it's that mindset
Where do you
of
wanna go?
where do I want to go?
Yeah. Think about the big picture and then work out what the steps are to get there.
And know that the steps will change. We're not goal setting and planning and putting an exact, this is how we do it in place.
Yep.
Be 100% comfortable with the plan changing.
Yep.
So next question, do I need to hire a professional to do my tax?
Yes. Always a qualified tax accountant.
There we go. Ryan, you take note of that one?
Yep. I've always got to hire a professional.
Great.
Got it. So that's it for our questions from our community online. So make sure that you do get online and follow us on Built Different Australia. Submit your questions. Let us know what you want our next guest to cover off. So thanks so much for coming in today, Katie.
My pleasure.
Pleasure's ours.
I learned a hell of a lot. It's almost like worrying how much you kind of pick up and just how important these side of things are to when you start moving forward, thinking about what happens next in your career. And it's kind of like a bit of a light bulb moment for us. And I don't want to be one of those people who gets down the track and then within 5 or 10 years of retirement and starts going,
that's right.
Where to from here?
And it's just about having conversations.
Absolutely.
So,
it's just it shouldn't be scary if you just start conversations, ask questions. Just, it has to be a priority to get your numbers right.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We'll look forward to having you on the podcast next time.